I did hear the word.
Yep.
Yeah. Good thought.
So, all right, we're not starting too late today. So, I'm going to go out on a limb and imagine that everybody here at one point or another in their lives have experienced rejection. Yeah? Anybody? Anybody? Anybody?
Yeah, never.
All right. So what I'd like for you to do is if you're dangerously close to falling asleep, this may put you over the edge. But if you'll close your eyes, I'm going to lead you through a guided meditation here. Just close your eyes and just take a few good breaths. And I invite you to recall an experience where you rejected someone. Now think of what it was like when you encountered this individual after you rejected them. And I invite you to take the next couple of minutes just considering these next two questions. What was different about the way you spoke or acted towards them as a result? And is there anything that you regret about the experience? After a few breaths, several breaths, you can open your eyes. And I'm just wondering if anybody is comfortable enough in a word or a phrase to describe that regret.
What do you mean by regret?
Well, is there anything that you
Sorry.
regret about that rejecting someone?
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. Yep.
Sorry. Disappointed in myself.
Mm.
I'm sorry I disappointed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Felt like
Yep. Yep.
Vindicated.
Vindicated. Okay.
but not anything I regret. I mean, I'm not like sorry I did what I did. I'm just saying I was sorry.
Yeah.
That
Gotcha.
that person was.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're going to look into a parable today that Jesus talks about with rejection as part of that parable. When we pray, the Lord be with you. Let us pray. God, we thank you for your presence with us in spirit and for your presence with us in each other. And we ask that you open us now to you. Amen. All right, so you guys have your little sheet of paper here. And if you'll read, just we can have some volunteers, but I'm going to look at the setting, the context. I'm not on the what, where, and the what, but I'm on the other side where it says vineyard at the bottom. And why don't we read the first part one aloud? Anybody want to do that?
Matthew's version of the parable of the wicked tenants is the second in a series of 3 parables that Jesus tells in the temple. The setting and context of the parable are crucial to its interpretation. Jesus has entered Jerusalem riding on a colt and been acclaimed as the Messianic Son of David, and the whole city was in turmoil. This acclamation of Jesus as the Son of David continues when he goes to the temple and overturns the tables of the money changers, prompting the chief priests and scribes to ask angrily, "Do you hear what these are saying?" Jesus leaves the city for the night. When he returns the next morning, he curses a fruitless fig tree, symbolizing the coming destruction of Jerusalem and disempowerment of the temple leadership. After this, he enters the temple and, not surprisingly, encounters a challenge to his authority from the chief priests and elders. The 3 parables that follow respond to this challenge, and each speaks differently to these Jewish leaders, not to the people as a whole. Thus, when in the first parable Jesus says, "The tax collectors and the prostitutes are going into the kingdom of God ahead of you," he judges the religious leaders, not the Jews as a people.
Okay. So we haven't read the passage yet, I know, but what's the most important thing about this background information to you?
Jesus curses and gets mad.
Yeah, yeah. This is a little bit of a trial. Feels a little bit like a trial. Maybe not exactly, but anything else kind of comes to mind about this?
Well, cursing the fruitless fig tree, I've always thought, is not the fig tree's fault.
Right, right.
I've always been so surprised at that.
So let's divide up. Y'all just stay where you are, but let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Perfect. So let's see. Will you be Nancy Hopkinson's partner? You don't have to get up, but
Thank you.
you 2 are no 1. You 2 are 2. You 2 are 3. You 2 are 4. Okay. Now the number 1. I want you to listen to this parable through the eyes of the landowner.
Okay.
Okay? The 2s will be through the eyes of the tenants of the vineyard. Okay? Number 3, through the servants or the slaves. Okay? That's who you're going to view this through. And then you guys will listen as the eyes through, you view it through the eyes of the Son. Yeah, the Son, S-O-N. Okay. And so keep these things in mind, or these issues in mind as you listen. Your character's respect or disrespect toward the other characters in the parable. So keep an eye on those things. And then also why your character would do the things that they do as a result of those views. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to read it, because y'all get to read it all the time. I got to find it first. But 21.
Parable of the 2 sons, is that the first one?
Yep.
And where are the tenants? Number 1 is the 33.
21, 28.
What's number 1?
You're the landowner.
What did I get? Oh, man, I ain't going to get a Bible. I got a companion to the Bible.
Which is symbolism, the landowner.
Come borrow a Bible from
Here,
somebody.
have my
That'll work.
revised standard.
That works. Thank you. And thanks for finding it for me, too. 21:33. All right.
What? The parable of the 2 sons?
No, not the 2 sons. 33.
Verse 33.
The parable of the wicked tenant.
Yeah, wicked tenants.
Wait a minute.
We're wicked.
Starts on 33.
Yep.
21,
Chapter, yeah,
We're evil farmers.
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
mine says evil farmers, I'm saying,
Okay.
Okay, got it.
All right. Here another parable. There was a householder who planted a vineyard and set a hedge around it and dug a wine press in it and built a tower and let it out to tenants and went into another country. When the season of fruit drew near, he sent his servants to the tenants to get his fruit. And the tenants took his servants and beat one, killed another, and stoned another. Again, he sent other servants, more than the first, and they did the same to them. Afterward, he sent his son to them, saying, "They will respect my son." But when the tenants saw the son, they said to themselves, "This is the heir. Come, let us kill him and have his inheritance." And they took him and cast him out of the vineyard and killed him. So, we're going to just stop right there. Yeah, I'm going to stop right there. So what do you think, Group 1? You guys are the landowner. And so y'all have respect for the other characters in this story?
We have respect? Not really, because I look at the landowner as God,
Okay.
symbolism. It's
I'm
God.
not sure how does he know what's going on?
Well, yeah, he comes back. Yeah, I mean, he sends these three groups.
You didn't read that part yet.
I'm sorry?
You read the son.
Yeah. Yeah, so he sent a group of slaves,
Right.
and then sent another group of slaves, and then finally sent his son.
But sending the group of slaves could be into Egypt too, when they were cast into Egypt.
I'm sorry?
In other words, you're looking at this whole thing as symbolism.
Yes, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
to me, the whole thing.
Well, sure, it's parable. Yeah.
Yeah, I think all the parables in the Bible are symbolism.
Mhm.
You can look at them.
Well,
But I think it's God looking at them and creating this, because you haven't read yet to the point of the Son. The Son is obviously Jesus and what they did to him.
right.
That's not what he's asking.
It's not what I'm asking.
That's not what he's asking you.
That's what your question again.
Well, I tell you what, we'll come back to y'all. All right?
Well,
So-
I think I have an answer to you.
Well, what was the question, because it might impact.
So the questions are, you know, your character respects or disrespects other characters in this story.
Okay.
And so what do they do as a result of those views?
Okay.
So you're asking the landowner.
Yeah, who he respects and who he disrespects in this story. And what does he do with that respect or disrespect? How do those actions come into play?
Well, I think first there's anger.
Okay?
And then how do you either mete out punishment or not
Right. Right.
as a landowner? How do you deal with your anger and the disrespect that the tenants and the slaves, that the tenants have shown to you?
Right.
That's
Right.
the question. How do you react?
Well, tenants, what do y'all think? Who do you respect and who do you disrespect?
Well, obviously, we don't respect the landowner.
Gotcha.
We don't respect the landowner or the servants.
And what did you do as a result of those views? You killed everybody that came. Yeah. Nobody gets out alive with y'all. Yeah.
We're evil, apparently, according to this.
Yeah, evidently.
We're evil farmers, yeah.
All right. So through the eyes of the slaves,
I guess they respected him enough to go to work for him, but.
yeah, they respected the landowner, right? Yeah. So they go.
Then they got killed.
Then they said, "Now, wait a minute, if the next group is going, we saw what happened in the first group."
Right. Right. Yeah. Sooner or later, it's going to get real hard to convince any of y'all to go. Yeah. All right. And through the Son, the eyes of the Son, who did y'all respect and disrespect?
Well, I think I respected my father in the beginning, because otherwise, why would I honor him and go?
Yeah.
And I don't know how much did the son know about what had happened already
Yeah, right. Yeah, he could be going blind into a trap kind of thing. Yeah.
But he
Yeah.
did what his father told him.
Right.
Right.
Well, and the other thing is that wasn't his inheritance. So there is a self-interest that the son has in going. You know, it's not just his father's bidding, but he's got to go and get his stuff back. Yeah. All right. So now we'll read the rest of it. Okay. And so this is where this is after the parable is over. This is the explanation, if you will. Okay. And so, well, let me just read. So when, therefore, the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to those tenants? And they said to him, he will put those wretches to a miserable death and let out the vineyard to other tenants who will give them the fruits in their season. Jesus said to them, have you never read in the Scriptures, the very stone which the builders rejected has become the head of the corner? This was the Lord's doing, and it was marvelous in our eyes. Therefore I tell you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a nation producing the fruits of it. When the chief priests and the Pharisees heard his parables, they perceived that he was speaking about them. But when they tried to arrest him, they feared the multitudes because they had held him to be a prophet. So what dilemma did the religious leaders face?
It was kind of a mixed bag. Either they would arrest him, whatever, but then the people would turn on him, so they had a terrible decision there. They wanted to assert their authority and arrest Jesus, but said, if I do that, the mob's coming after me.
Yeah, it's not exactly, but really close to a catch-22. Yeah. Really close. So, have anybody ever been in that position before? If you'll pardon the expression, where you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. Yep.
Many times.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. In fact, I feel like I just sort of like live in between, these two peaks of damned and damned, and I'm just kind of hanging out. But also that's because I was raised in North Carolina, but between the two. Was it the humble valley between the two peaks of
Mountains of conceit.
conceit? That's what it was. Yeah, with Virginia and South Carolina on either side. So how did that dilemma, though, that catch-22, that catch-2020, that's pretty good too. But how did that dilemma that Brenda brought in play into the placement of this incident in the gospel? So this is right after Jesus' last time coming into Jerusalem. So why you see the connection of all this sort of stuff? It's all swirling around. When we get to Holy Week, which we didn't really get to have this year like we used to have had, and hopefully this coming year will be better about it. But that's why Holy Week for me is so amazing, is that it's the culmination, if you will, of all these different strings that really kind of come in really at the last minute and make all this stuff happen, and so you've got intrigue on so many levels, and it's all just so descriptive to me of human beings. I mean, I have the privilege to be involved in some of the conversations with the NAACP and the mayor. Same stuff. That's not clean and easy whatsoever. It's messy. You've got, different perspectives, different desires, different wanted outcomes, and all from in the same group. It's amazing. So, you have all these different players, just like you do with the last days of Jesus. I mean, it's amazing. So let's see here. I prepared yesterday, so it's all stale. I have to read it again. I should have just done it right before class like I always do. So yeah, let's talk about verses 41 and 42, and I'll read it. 41 and 44. So let me read this again. So verse 41, and the chief priest and the scribe said, "He will put those wretches to a miserable death and let out the vineyard to other tenants who will give them the fruit of their season." And verses 46. Is that right? Oh, I'm sorry, 44. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And verse 44. Will somebody read verse 44? Because I'm missing it.
And he who falls on the stone will be broken to pieces, but on whoever it falls, it will scatter him like dust.
There you go.
That's not what mine says.
That's not
Right,
what.
yeah, we're the same. That's not at all.
Read yours.
Mine says, the one who falls on this stone will be broken to pieces, and it will crush anyone on whom it falls.
Yeah.
So,
King James.
so this is somewhat poetic, but still pretty strong language of God's judgment. So how y'all feel about that? We're not a real judgment focusing parish here at Holy Cross Faith Memorial. I don't do fire and brimstone very
Sounds
often.
kind of Old Testament.
That's exactly
Old-
what I was
Old
going to say. It
Testament.
sounds like the Old
It
Testament.
sort of
Doesn't
goes
sound-
back to the, maybe because it's the foretelling from the Old Testament.
Mhm.
Part of the foretelling, but Lordy.
Yeah.
One of my little study books,
Uh-huh.
I have a bunch. It says Matthew's community would find in this parable an explanation for the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans in AD 70 and a justification for its claim to be the true people of God.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now that's interesting.
Matthew wrote primarily to the Jews there in Jerusalem and in the surrounding area, and that was a big connection, that they
And
had.
the temple found at that point?
In 70,
Well, was this written after?
this would have been written after that. Yeah, you see that happen a lot in the Gospels, especially Matthew, Mark, and Luke. You see little hints that it was not written, these events were not recorded as they happened. And so you see little hints that you go through where it's really more of a church trying to figure out what we're supposed to do with all this stuff, and so it was later. My favorite example of that is it's the Sea of Galilee, right, all the way through. This is Mark, but Sea of Galilee all the way through. And then when Jesus appears to the disciples there on the beach after he's been resurrected, it's all of a sudden the Sea of Tiberias. And so I wondered, I said, well, why the name change? Same body of water, right? Nothing else has changed except the name. And really what had happened after Jesus' earthly time was that tilapia became a delicacy in Rome. And that's where that fish comes from. It's from that lake. So it was huge. They would, and that fishing business really was getting up to speed. It really was thriving,
I thought it was an African fish.
Well, sort of. I mean, it's not that far away,
Yeah, that's true.
But they would catch them, pack them in salt, and send them over to Rome where it was a delicacy. And so Caesar owns everything, and so his name was put on that lake. Not the first time that big-headed rulers put their names on something, right?
And then sometimes we have to change them 100
Yeah,
years later.
right. Yeah. But to assert prominence and power, small men will put their name on something big. We've seen this time and time again.
Well, okay.
And but it's true.
I'm just laughing because it's so true.
Yeah, it's true. And so, but here's the thing: is that when it was the Sea of Galilee, it was everybody's. When it was the Sea of Tiberias, it's Caesar's. And the reason for the name change is that this is when the church becomes the church, is there on the beach with the resurrected Jesus teaching the disciples. They eat some fish over some charcoal fire, all that sort of stuff. And Jesus says what? At the end, what does he say? What are they doing? That last appearance. Remember, they're fishing. And Jesus says, try on the other side, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because Jesus, you put whatever name you want on that lake. It's still Jesus. Jesus is still Lord. You know, and for a struggling church that's still persecuted by the Romans, that's very encouraging to hear those stories. You know, that you know, it may be, you know, you go from fishers of fish to fishers of people. Your lake may be the empire, but Jesus is still Lord. He still knows where the fish are. You know, those little things like that were really important to the early church. It helps understand where some of these events, like the destruction of the temple later, all that sort of stuff, this fits in with that now. It makes sense now. So let's see here. Let's talk about the stone that the builders rejected. That's 118. I have moved to the prayer book, and I want to make sure that they're still in order. Okay, so I'll just read this little section here. Open for me the gates of righteousness, and I will enter them. I will offer thanks to the Lord. This is the gate of the Lord. He who is righteous may enter. I will give thanks to you, for you answered me and have become my salvation. The same stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. This is the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. On this day the Lord has acted. I will rejoice and be glad in it. So that's... Yep, that's where that one is. Yeah, right there. Yep. So, you know, so you can kind of see that. Does everybody understand that whole stone that the builders rejected? Okay. Yeah, it's Jesus and all that. Okay. All right. And so so let's go again. I mean, let's talk about what were the reasons that the chief priests and the scribes wanted to, to arrest Jesus? I mean, what were the things they were after? Okay.
They were afraid he was gonna usurp their power and authority.
Gotcha.
Knowing there's a rival.
Well, then he had all those rules, you couldn't do this, you couldn't do that, whatever. And Jesus was kind of smoothing those things out, that you can work on the Sabbath, you can do these things, which undermines all their teachings.
Also, I mean, don't forget the parable that we just heard. It's pretty condemning. I mean, to say this, I mean, Jesus has got some guts, if nothing else. I mean, to, be able to say this kind of thing. But he essentially calls the religious leaders murderers, which is way up there in the whole Ten Commandments thing, So that, that's pretty gutsy, to do that. And you see the response that he gets. All right. So now, let's do the what. And if I could have a volunteer to read.
What shall we make of this judgment on Israel's religious leaders? We note that here Jesus does not reject the whole people of Israel, but his conflict with the chief priests is preceded and triggered by his healings of the blind and the lame, who come to him within the temple precincts. The suffering, impoverished, and illiterate common people rightly acclaim him. The educated leaders do not. Thus the
So, I do want to make it really clear here. These passages can elicit an anti-Semitic kind of angle if you really let them. But you have to remember that Jesus isn't talking to just the Jewish community. He's talking to the religious leaders. And it's a big, big thing to remember and not forget. Because otherwise, you start applying, all of these concerns that Jesus had on everybody. And if you look at the parable, he's really talking about the religious leaders only, let's see here. I do like the suffering, impoverished, and illiterate common people rightly acclaim him. The educated leaders do not. Is that fair to the educated leaders?
It was self-preservation to them, wasn't it? Because if the illiterate common people followed Jesus and his teaching, then they too would be blessed with whatever. And then the educated people were out in the cold. That made no sense, did it?
No, it didn't. And part of the thing that I'm stuck on is that we're all educated people here.
Yeah.
So what do you think? I mean, what do we do with this?
But we don't reject it.
We
It's
try to
different
use it.
times.
Do it?
We try to use our education to help the people.
Right. I know I can't, can't hear anymore. I'll get it going. Yep.
Wide open.
Those melons,
Did my umbrella blow off?
I'll be red in time.
That's better.
Well, where it refers to Isaiah 5,
Yeah, we're-
8 through 30,
Yep.
the little subtitle in line,
Mm-hmm.
right before verse 8, says, social injustice denounced.
Yeah. Yep.
Social injustice.
Injustice denounced.
Yeah, we're gonna look at that Isaiah passage next. But what is a possible misinterpretation of that? The suffering acclaim him, and the educated leaders do not. So what's a possible misinterpretation of that?
Do away with the education.
Right? Yeah, you just
I didn't view it. Do away with the upper class. This is kind of a class thing. Right. And, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Do away with it.
Yep.
Yeah, but, you said we're all educated people here, which is true. However,
And how would we do?
we're not like leaders per se. We're not sort of the ruling class in the church, even though lots of us have leadership positions, but I don't consider us like the Pharisees. I mean, we're not making policy, so to speak, which they were. They were making the rules. I'm not sure we're making any rules.
I don't know. I
I think the rules are laid out for us by the bishops and.
Other people might see that differently.
Well, but we don't have a bishop right now.
Well,
I could-
we have Curry, and then we have surrogates under him, and rules we have to follow, but I see us as the common people, whether we have an education or not.
Mhm. Yeah,
for
yeah.
what it's worth.
Well, and I think, yeah, that could be a potential misunderstanding, is, that, essentially, y'all get Jesus, but clergy never will. There's that. If you want to apply it to that, this is, it's a very challenging statement to say. But that's the thing, it's a challenge.
It makes you turn your eyes on yourself.
It does, right?
I think that's one thing.
I think it also makes you have to be aware of the privilege of being educated. You know what I mean? Like,
And you use your talents to
right,
try to help,
Yeah,
the lower class,
right,
others,
right.
the outcasts.
Well, let's look at Isaiah. Are you already there? Will you read chapter 5, verses 1 through 7?
And the subtitle there says, "The Song of the Unfruitful Vineyard."
Yeah.
Let me sing for my beloved, my love song concerning his vineyard. My beloved had a vineyard on a very fertile hill. He dug it and cleared it of stones and planted it with choice vines. He built a watchtower in the midst of it and hewed out a wine vat in it. He expected it to yield grapes, but it yielded wild grapes. And now, inhabitants of Jerusalem and people of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard. What more was there to do for my vineyard that I have not done in it? When I expected it to yield grapes, why did it yield wild grapes? And now I will tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will remove its head, and it shall be devoured. I will break down its wall, and it shall be trampled down. I will make it a waste. It shall not be pruned or hoed, and it shall be overgrown with briars and thorns. I will also command the clouds that they rain no rain upon it. For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the people of Judah are his pleasant planting. He expected justice, but saw bloodshed, righteousness, but heard a cry.
What was that last word?
Cry.
You will see in Isaiah and in Jeremiah and in Amos and probably others. There's a wonderful play on words. Read that, but read those last, this, but this. Those. It's the last verse. Just
For
read
the
it.
vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the people of Judah are his pleasant planting. He expected justice, but saw bloodshed, righteousness, but heard a cry.
So justice, bloodshed. Justice in Hebrew is mishpat. Bloodshed is mishpak. So there's one letter difference. Mishpat, mishpak. And so they do that a lot. It must have sounded really good when you were reading it aloud back in the day. From left to right. But yeah, right to left. But yeah, that's just one of the, and if you ever hear that in any of the Old Testament prophets, that's why, because it just rolled off the tongue. You expected mishpat, but instead you got mishpak. And so just a little aside thing, but so Jesus kind of uses a parable in the New Testament to sort of interpret a parable from the Old Testament. Isn't that interesting? That's Jesus probably grew up reading Isaiah in the thing, and this is how he's taken it further. Yeah. So how does Jesus' parable reinterpret the Isaiah one? There's no visitors sent, right?
No tenants.
No tenants. And there's really no,
It's just things don't turn out the way you planned them.
right. I mean, there's no,
Whether I hired anybody or not, the darn vineyard didn't grow.
and there was no,
And there was no human interaction, it was just,
right. And Jesus actually has several times for redemption that get missed. You know what I mean? In the Isaiah version, there's no detail like that, you know.
Well, verse 8 says, woe to you who add house to house and join field to field until no space is left and you live alone in the land. That
Yeah.
kind of foretells like, well, you gave up all your chances by doing what you did.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
Which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
What he said.
And there is one unbuilded lot in my neighborhood now, you know. So, yeah, that have trees. That's it. Kind of doing that around here. All right, so let's connect with the then with the now. So if you'll flip your pages back over, and we'll go to part 2 of the context and connection, the vineyard, all that sort of stuff.
Back in Matthew.
Yeah,
Part 2 of it.
yeah, of your handout.
Back in Matthew.
Yeah. Somebody want to read that?
The parable of the wicked tenants is remarkably helpful for guiding reflection on the life of the church today. While it must be interpreted in its historical context as part of the teaching of Jesus against the religious leaders of his day, and the reach of the gospel be beyond the confines of Israel, the parable must not remain locked within the limitations of past history. As gospel, it has contemporary significance. John Calvin, in his commentary on this parable, noted as much for his day. Calvin identified 2 theological points of continuing relevance. 1, we should expect people, and especially religious leaders, to try to hinder the reign of Christ. And 2, whatever contrivances are mounted against the church, God will be victorious.
Yeah.
Constant battle.
So you can kind of see, so you see now, right, where this can come in. The whole, that whole, accepted by, those who suffer, but rejected by the educated. I mean, that's like what the Reformation was built on, man. I mean, the Great Reformation was built around that understanding. That the, those who suffered, can understand God, but the educated have a really hard time with it,
So people still believe this way?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Oh, yeah. I mean, I have to be really careful. Some people ask where I went to seminary, to play the name game or, junior guards. And some people ask because I shouldn't have gone.
Yeah.
To do what I do, my mind has been polluted by the educated.
Yeah.
And so,
Oh, yeah.
it's just different. It's just different.
I remember the first time I ever heard that idea, I was horrified. I couldn't imagine that they thought that going to seminary was bad for you, or being educated was bad for you.
Well, now I will say though that, I mean, I have this conversation with all the kids when they are confirmed, that the whole point of that confirmation is that they go up in front of everybody and everybody can see them, and they make this promise in front of everyone else. And the reason that they do that in front of everybody else is so that the rest of us can go, okay, they're going to show me how to live out my baptismal vows in a new way. So in some ways, it is nice to have, new converts to the faith, or new folks that have confessed the faith, to help lead the way, because it's not stymied by the way it's always been done. So there is that importance. It's not, you know what I mean? You know, we do need to look at that. I've also suggested to every nonprofit that will listen to me to have former clients on the board of directors. Because again, that will be a perspective, you know, that they didn't get an associate's degree in nonprofit management or whatever, but they sure know what it's like on the other side, you know. And so, is there any other testimony that this parable is remarkably helpful for guiding reflection on the life of the church today? I mean, how is this parable good for us now?
I think that look at it as sometimes have you not learned anything?
Mm.
We've done over and over in Isaiah,
Mm-hmm.
in
Right.
Matthew, Jesus told us, and I think he's looking at us saying, look y'all, have you not listened to me, and have you not learned anything?
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think that's when, educated or not, we have to say, look, or maybe educated especially, look, we are not learning anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's kind of sad. I mean, it's kind of depressing. What you say.
Well, you know, my dad told me. He said, you know, I was faced with a choice. He said either we had kids young, and you know, we would have our marriage essentially after y'all move out, you know, or we have kids late, but then, you know, they're too old to really play, you know what I mean? And I think that's one of the challenges is, because my dad said, I'd love to impart the wisdom of my later years, but have the energy of the earlier ones, you know. And I think that's the big challenge that we face is that justice and righteousness and compassion don't get into our genetic memory. You know, we all learn those in our own lifetime. We don't just, you know what I mean? Lily and Willow have not inherited my spirituality by virtue of genetics. They will have to inherit that by virtue of nurture, you know, and not nature. Right. I mean, you know what I mean, though. But that's the thing. And so, it is a generational reset almost of all these things that we learn. We're not going to get any better. We have to do that in our own individual lives again and again and again. You know? But yeah, it's not like I'm trying to think of a good example of this. Yeah, I think I kind of got cars on my brain today, so I'm really sorry. But you know, it's sort of like restoring an El Camino. Well, that's the only one that's been restored. You're going to have to do that again to the next one. You know, I mean, when you restore one, it doesn't restore them all. You know, and I think and with people, that's a good thing because that gives us that free will, and that ability to grow to who we are, you know, and all that, and you know, gives us the liberty that, you know, that I think that we desire as human beings, you know. So, but yeah, that would be a lot easier though, wouldn't it? You know, well, in heard it the first time generations ago. You know what I mean? That would be.
Is that what you're saying? It would be easier if it wasn't a deal.
Exactly. You know, say I developed the spiritual practice of morning and evening prayer every day. And then, you know, I meet my bride and we have a kid and the kid pops out doing morning and evening prayer every day. You know what I mean?
I can't help but think about communities like the Amish
Mm-hmm.
who isolate themselves and the children are brought up
Yeah.
in that. Of course, some leave,
Yeah.
but it is a different
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know.
mindset.
But I would suggest, well, you know, there's that example also in the way back mountains in the Himalayas. I walked through places like that where, you know, some of the kids may go to Kathmandu once before they're 18, maybe. You know what I mean? And that's it, you know. And is that a happier village. It seemed that way in some respects, but let's say not better or worse generally than life here. You know.
Just don't know what you don't know at that point.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So I don't know.
But you know, sometimes, you have the collar and you're the priest and all that, and you think about, if you're a priest, you may be able to do more as a lay person.
Oh yeah.
Spiritual, because you're under constraints. And people that consider or want to think they have a calling, that calling may not necessarily be a priest or a minister or the preacher. That person's calling and education could be, and could almost be freer to, so education or no, seminary or no, it's a balancing act, sort of, where your spiritual calling comes from and is going to.
Oh, it's a pyramid, but it's an upside down one, where the bishop or maybe even, Michael Curry is at the bottom. You know what I mean? You're right. I mean, our spirituality, I don't know about the further you go down the ordination road, because there ain't no road for me. It was just a stop. I'm here now. I'm not going any further. But yeah, really. But yeah, I think that's the challenge, is that more and more of my spirituality is prescribed to me, where it's only described to y'all. You know what I mean? But I'm expected. I mean, and I do, and I love it, which is good because it's what I'm supposed to do, right? But yeah.
I wouldn't say it was wrong, but I'm just saying it's
less
not always
yeah.
educated.
Right. Oh, right.
Seminarians.
Exactly. But I think the thing is, though, is that there are many communities that have adopted that understanding that if you went to seminary, you've messed it up. I mean, that's why Swanee was started in the first place. Is that the wealthy landowners, farm owners in the South, were tired of sending their boys up north to learn in the universities, because they would come back with these harebrained ideas of abolition and stuff like that. So let's keep them here in the South where we control what they learn. Because these foreign ideas don't fit. And that could be an interpretation of that. The suffering understand Jesus, but the educated don't. And that could be that.
Keep your women uneducated too, so they don't get any ideas about it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for
Property
sure.
ownership.
Yeah. Yeah.
Being able to make choices in your life.
He has a vote.
Yeah.
There you go. So let's go back. So I think this is something that we'll end on today. But we got out into the church and the church history and broad spiritual age. Let's get back to the individuals here. That's where we started today. And so rejecting others can potentially jeopardize our relationship with God, especially if we do that rejection in the name of God. And so let's read the now what. I've lost my piece of paper. So somebody will read the now what for me.
Another way in which we reject God occurs when we reject some of God's people for reasons of our own. Human beings are capable of doing terrible things to other people whom they are somehow able to define as less worthy, less human, less valuable than themselves. If we can manage to turn another human being into the other, there is no limit to what we will do or will allow to be done to them. We can be as brutal to one another as were the men who beat, stoned, and killed people in Matthew 21:35 through 37. When we reject some of God's people, we are rejecting the God who made them.
So, Can y'all identify some examples for me in our community where such rejection takes place?
Yeah.
Where?
Racism.
Racism.
is-
Okay. Okay.
The classism and well, where you live, where you can live. It's not always racism, though that's the big thing here. It's like, well, only certain people can live in this neighborhood.
Mhm.
Did
Did you know?
You have to have certain size, whatever house, whatever.
Well, sure. Yeah, I'm thinking of like the Captain's Cove up there in Merle's Inlet, where you have to be an active 55-year-old or older. You gotta check all these boxes to be able to live there. Santee Cooper, when you move here and get your electric turned on, they sometimes charge a deposit and sometimes they don't. Is that based on your credit history? No. It's based on the address you're moving into. Yeah. Yeah.
It's redlining.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Lord,
Yeah, I know. Yep.
didn't know that.
So how does your faith, or your relationship with God suffer when you reject somebody else?
Oh, it conflicts you terribly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. It's conflicting.
I relate to another rejection. Every year, I coached for 20 years. I had to cut kids, good kids, nice kids, from teams.
Yeah.
And then had to deal with the parents, with them, the crying, the anger, in 9 times out of 10, it's the best thing for them. Because that one would go on and she way too tall to play field hockey, and she was the captain of the volleyball team by the time she was a senior. But it's hard when you are the person that has to reject or put up these lists. I wouldn't go home those nights because I taught in the same community where I lived.
Yeah.
I would go to Jill and John and Waring's house. and still had people following me in my driveway.
Yeah.
So the consequences of rejecting people and how they felt and how you felt and how you did it, that was the other thing. That was the hardest part of that whole job.
I think if you reject somebody in your heart, or if you do it, for whatever reason, then you've got to see the damage you're doing to yourself. Because
Yeah.
you are not free to love or to accept people or whatever, so it
Yep.
is a dangerous, two-edged sword.
Yep. I have found that rejection is your wilting in front of the fear. And
Say that again, the wilting
in front of the fear. And the fear is that you will love this person and care about them, but it's easier to reject them and get it off the board. That kind of thing. And so yeah. And that's not what we're called to do,
You put yourself in prison.
Yeah, exactly.
Prison that
Yep.
you do for yourself, and you become bitter.
Mm-hmm.
But you're I'm like the kind of rejection you were thinking about, and the one I was thinking about. It wasn't like, I don't know, I don't feel like it's the same thing.
No, it's like what I thought about was not hiring somebody
Yeah.
or having to
Yeah.
fire somebody. And that's immediately what came to my mind, more like what Nancy talked
It's
about.
like not
And I
hiring.
put it,
You have to make a
a
choice. It was your
personal,
decision
yes.
to make,
Yeah.
you had to make that choice. And so,
Yeah.
Yep.
I think it's a different situation than rejection.
Yeah.
Still, the way you handle it would be the same. In other words,
If you
do
don't make
you
it
do
personal.
this with love,
Yeah.
or do you do this with anger or hate?
Yeah.
What is the reasoning behind it and how you handle it doesn't matter
Yeah, well,
in
and
my
how-
opinion, what is fair?
or how the other person perceives it. Because if you don't hire someone who's put everything they could into selling themselves to you for a job, and you have to make, that is difficult.
Yep.
Because they feel like you're rejecting them as a person. So it is, oh God, yes, oh yeah.
Well,
So
and
they
the
don't
and the
react.
final decision about whether or not somebody gets married
Oh God.
here at the parish is me.
Oh,
And I've not told everybody yet. You know, I've
you
told
have
some
to
of them no.
reject the whole concept of this couple being married here.
Yep.
Oops.
Yeah, I know.
Look.
Well, I was more thinking about in adolescence when you reject people emotionally.
Oh yeah, when you
Or
dump
because
somebody.
you're
So I
being
was thinking.
judgmental.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Not part of the
That's a
group.
different.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I wouldn't want to be part of that group. Look at them, you get rejected by that, you know, then
Or the bullying that goes on in schools.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
About adolescents.
Yeah.
You know, the kid sits down at the lunch table and everybody else gets up and goes, you know.
Yep.
Happened to one of my grandkids, you know.
Yep.
But it made her a strong person.
it still hurt, I bet.
Oh, yeah, it was devastating. And you had to handle that as a parent.
You get strong.
And that's the same thing with the hiring or not hiring.
Mhm. Oh, that's so hard.
Yeah, this is a very historical parable, but I love the way that Jesus is able to make parables work in any in any place. I mean, this is you know what I mean? Like that's something. I mean, I've read that to Lily and Willow before. The temple stuff they didn't even come up. You know, it's just about how God sends somebody to you. You got to take care of them and don't kill them. You know, I mean, that was more of a hospitality thing. It's just amazing. You know, just amazing. Well, let us pray and we'll finish the day. And Holy God, excuse me, may we find in your gracious acceptance of us the means to be gracious. When it seems easier to reject, may we assess the cost of that rejection. May we assess the cost that rejection may levy on others and on us. And when we feel rejected ourselves, may we find the empowering assurance that you claim us as your own. In Jesus Christ we pray. Amen. I don't know why I can't read today. Need more commas. More commas in the way.
Very much ties into chaos. So, to the book chaos.
No, but I could see though. I could see. Yeah.
So, I mean, talking about